What I'm about to tell you is a story that has been buried for decades, a story that the music industry didn't want you to hear, a story so emotional, so powerful, so deeply human that everyone who witnessed it was changed forever. This is the night that Michael Jackson proved he wasn't just a performer, he was something else entirely, something we didn't deserve. It was 1992. Michael Jackson was at the absolute peak of his career. The Dangerous World Tour was breaking every record imaginable. Stadiums were selling out in minutes. Countries were fighting for the chance to host him. The entire planet wanted to see the king of pop perform live. But on this particular night, in this particular city, something happened that nobody expected. Something that would test Michael Jackson in ways that even he couldn't have anticipated. And what he did in response would make 10,000 people cry. Not from sadness, not from grief, but from witnessing something so beautiful, so pure, so utterly selfless that it restored their faith in humanity. Before I tell you this story, I need you to understand something. I need you to understand who Michael Jackson really was. Not the tabloid version, not the caricature that the media created. The real Michael Jackson, the one that only a handful of people ever truly knew. Because without understanding that, you won't fully appreciate what happened on that night. You won't understand why it mattered so much. You won't understand why grown men fell to their knees and wept. So let me take you back. Let me set the stage. Let me show you the events that led to one of the most incredible moments in music history. The venue was a mid-sized arena in Eastern Europe. I'm not going to name the exact city because some of the people involved in this story are still alive and they've asked to remain anonymous. But trust me when I say this happened, every word of it. The arena held about 12,000 people, and on this night, it was completely sold out, every seat filled, every standing area packed. People had traveled from neighboring countries just to be there. Some had saved money for years. Some had sold possessions. Some had hitchhiked for days. That's how much Michael Jackson meant to people. That's how powerful his pull was. He wasn't just a singer. He wasn't just a dancer. He was hope. He was joy. He was the promise that magic still existed in this world. The show was scheduled to start at 8 p.m. By 6 p.m., the arena was already filling up. By 7 p.m., it was nearly full. The energy was electric. People were chanting Michael's name. They were singing his songs. They were dancing in the aisles. Outside the arena, thousands more had gathered. People who couldn't get tickets but wanted to be close to the venue anyway. They set up radios to listen to the concert. They huddled together in groups, sharing stories about what Michael Jackson meant to them. Inside the arena, the opening acts had finished. The stage was being prepared for Michael's entrance. The crew was running final checks on the lighting, the sound system, the hydraulics, the pyrotechnics. Everything had to be perfect. Michael Jackson accepted nothing less. Backstage, Michael was in his dressing room. He was going through his pre-show ritual, vocal warm-ups, stretches, mental preparation. He was focused. He was ready. He was about to give these people the show of their lives. And then at 7:45 p.m., 15 minutes before showtime, everything changed. There was a knock on the dressing room door. Michael's security chief answered it. Standing in the hallway were 6 police officers, and they weren't there to provide security. They were there to stop the show. The lead officer explained the situation. There had been a complaint filed, a legal dispute involving the concert promoter, something about unpaid debts, licensing issues, contractual violations. The details were complicated, and honestly, they didn't matter. What mattered was the bottom line. The police had a court order. The concert could not proceed. Michael Jackson was not allowed to take the stage. Michael's team was stunned. His manager immediately got on the phone with lawyers. His security chief tried to negotiate with the officers. His publicist started making calls to anyone who might be able to help. But the police were firm. The court order was valid. If Michael Jackson stepped onto that stage, he would be arrested on the spot. Now I want you to imagine this scene. Imagine being Michael Jackson in that moment. You've got 10,000 fans waiting for you, people who have sacrificed so much just to see you perform, people whose faces are filled with joy and anticipation, people who are about to have their hearts broken. You've got a legal system working against you, a court order signed by a judge, police officers ready to arrest you if you don't comply, your team telling you there's nothing they can do. And you've got 15 minutes to make a decision. What do you do? Most performers would have hidden in their dressing room. They would have let their management handle it. They would have let someone else deliver the bad news to the crowd. They would have protected themselves. But Michael Jackson was not most performers. He listened to the police. He heard their orders. He understood the consequences. And then he asked them one question, a question that would change everything. He asked if he could at least go out and speak to the crowd, not perform, just speak, just explain what was happening, just apologize in person. The police officers looked at each other. They hadn't anticipated this request. Their orders were to prevent the concert, but speaking to the crowd wasn't technically a concert. There was no music, no performance, just a man talking to people. After a brief discussion, the lead officer agreed. Michael could go out and address the crowd, but no music, no dancing, no performance of any kind, and if he tried anything, he would be immediately arrested. Michael nodded. He understood. His team tried to stop him. They told him it was too risky. They told him the crowd might riot. They told him he should just leave through the back entrance and let the promoter deal with the fallout. But Michael shook his head. These people had come to see him. They had paid money they couldn't afford. They had traveled distances they couldn't spare. The least he could do was look them in the eyes and explain what was happening. At 8 p.m., the lights in the arena went dark. The crowd erupted in cheers. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. Michael Jackson was about to appear. But instead of the explosive opening they expected, instead of the pyrotechnics and the dancers and the pounding music, a single spotlight appeared on the stage. And Michael Jackson walked out alone. No costume, no glove, no hat, just Michael in simple black clothing, walking slowly to the center of the stage. The crowd went silent. Something was wrong. They could feel it. This wasn't how the show was supposed to start. This wasn't the entrance they had seen in videos and photographs. Michael reached the microphone. He stood there for a moment, looking out at the sea of faces, 10,000 people, all staring at him, all waiting for an explanation. And then he spoke. He spoke in a soft voice, a gentle voice, the voice of a man who was carrying an enormous weight on his shoulders. He told them that he was sorry. He told them that something had happened that was beyond his control. He told them that the concert could not proceed tonight. The crowd gasped. Some people started crying immediately. Others started shouting in confusion. A few started heading toward the exits, but most just stood there, frozen, unable to process what they were hearing. Michael waited for the noise to die down, and then he continued. He told them that he had fought as hard as he could to make this show happen. He told them that he had begged the authorities to let him perform. He told them that he would do anything to change this situation if he could. But he couldn't, and he was devastated. His voice cracked, and the crowd saw something they had never seen before. They saw tears forming in Michael Jackson's eyes. This wasn't a performance. This wasn't acting. This was real. Michael Jackson was crying in front of 10,000 people. The arena fell completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Every single person was holding their breath, watching this moment unfold. And then Michael did something that nobody expected. He stepped away from the microphone. He walked to the edge of the stage, and he sat down, letting his legs dangle over the side, putting himself at eye level with the people in the front rows. He was no longer the king of pop on a pedestal. He was just a man, sitting with his people, sharing their disappointment, feeling their pain. And he started talking, not through the microphone, just talking, quietly, intimately, to the people closest to him. He asked them their names. He asked them where they came from. He asked them what his music meant to them. And one by one, people started responding. They told him their stories. They told him about hardships they had overcome. They told him about how his songs had given them strength. They told him about loved ones who had passed away listening to his music. The people further back couldn't hear what was being said, but they could see what was happening. They could see Michael Jackson sitting on the edge of the stage, holding hands with fans, wiping tears from their cheeks, embracing them like old friends. Word started spreading through the crowd. People started passing the message back. Michael is staying. Michael is talking to us. Michael isn't leaving. The police officers backstage were getting nervous. This wasn't what they had agreed to. This was becoming something else, something bigger, something they couldn't control. But what could they do? He wasn't performing. He wasn't singing. He wasn't dancing. He was just talking, just connecting, just being human. An hour passed, then 2 hours. Michael never left the stage. He never stopped talking to people. He moved from one section of the audience to another, spending time with everyone he could reach. He signed autographs. He took photographs. He listened to stories. He shared stories of his own. He laughed with people. He cried with people. He prayed with people. The police eventually gave up. They couldn't arrest a man for being kind. They couldn't handcuff someone for showing love. They retreated to the edges of the arena and just watched, as amazed as everyone else, at what was unfolding. At some point, around the 3-hour mark, something remarkable happened. A young girl, maybe 10 or 11 years old, was lifted onto the stage by people in the crowd. She was crying. She was clutching a piece of paper in her hand. She was so nervous she could barely walk. Michael saw her and immediately went to her. He knelt down so he was at her height. He took her hands. He asked her name. Through her tears, she managed to tell him, and then she showed him the piece of paper she was holding. It was a drawing she had made, a drawing of Michael Jackson. She had spent weeks working on it. She had planned to give it to him after the show. Michael looked at the drawing. He studied it carefully, and then he did something that broke everyone's heart. He started crying again, openly, without shame, tears streaming down his face. He told the girl that it was the most beautiful drawing he had ever received. He told her that he would treasure it forever. He told her that she had a gift and that she should never stop creating art. And then he hugged her, a long, genuine embrace, the kind of hug a father gives to a daughter, the kind of hug that says you matter, you are important, you are loved. The arena erupted in tears. Grown men who had been holding it together finally broke down. Women were sobbing openly. Children were crying without understanding why. It was a wave of emotion that swept through the entire building. This wasn't a concert. This was something far more powerful. This was a moment of pure human connection, a moment when the barriers between celebrity and fan completely disappeared, a moment when 10,000 people became one family. And Michael Jackson was at the center of it, not as a king, not as a superstar, but as a brother, a friend, a fellow human being who understood pain and wanted to ease it. The night went on. Michael stayed until almost midnight, 4 hours after he was supposed to have left, 4 hours of talking, listening, sharing, caring. At some point, the arena staff stopped trying to enforce any rules. They just let it happen. Some of them joined in, moved by what they were witnessing. The concession workers, the security guards, the cleaning crew, everyone was part of this moment. When Michael finally had to leave, when his team finally convinced him that he needed rest, that his body couldn't take any more, he made one final gesture. He stood at the center of the stage. He looked out at the crowd that remained. Many people had stayed the entire time, refusing to leave, not wanting this moment to end. And he made a promise. He promised that he would come back. He promised that he would give them the concert they deserved. He promised that this wasn't goodbye, it was just a pause. The crowd believed him. They chanted his name. They waved their hands. They sent love and gratitude across the arena in waves. And then Michael Jackson walked off the stage. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened next is almost as remarkable as what happened during those 4 hours. True to his word, Michael came back, 6 months later, when all the legal issues had been resolved. Michael Jackson returned to that same city, that same arena. But this time, he didn't just do one show. He did three consecutive nights, 3 concerts for the price of one. And for every person who had a ticket to the original cancelled show, admission was free, completely free. Michael paid for it out of his own pocket, millions of dollars, because he had made a promise, and Michael Jackson kept his promises. The 3 nights of concerts became legendary. People who attended say they were the best performances Michael ever gave. He poured everything he had into those shows. Every song was perfect. Every dance move was flawless. Every moment was magic. At the end of the final show, Michael brought out the little girl with the drawing. She was there with her family, special guests of Michael himself. He had flown them in, paid for their hotel, given them the best seats in the house. And on stage, in front of 20,000 people, he showed the audience her drawing. He told the story of what had happened that night 6 months ago. He told them about how this little girl had reminded him what really mattered. The arena exploded in cheers. The little girl, overwhelmed, started crying again. And Michael, ever the showman, ever the human being, knelt down and hugged her just like he had before. That moment was captured on camera. The photograph became one of the most famous images of Michael Jackson's career. It shows him on his knees, embracing this child, his face a mixture of joy and tears, the crowd behind them a blur of lights and raised hands. Some people call it the most human photograph ever taken of a celebrity. I call it the truth. The truth about who Michael Jackson really was. Not the eccentric recluse the tabloids portrayed, not the bizarre figure that late-night comedians mocked, not the mysterious character that conspiracy theorists invented. The real Michael Jackson, the one who cared more about people than about fame, the one who would rather sit on the edge of a stage for 4 hours than disappoint a single fan, the one who spent millions of dollars to keep a promise to strangers. That was Michael Jackson. And that night in 1992, 10,000 people saw it for themselves. Most of those people are still alive today. They're scattered across the world now, different countries, different lives, different paths. But ask any of them about that night, and they'll tell you the same thing. They'll tell you that it changed their lives. They'll tell you that they've never forgotten it. They'll tell you that they think about it every time they hear a Michael Jackson song. And then, most of them will start crying. Not because they're sad, but because they were there, because they witnessed something beautiful, because for a few hours they were part of something bigger than themselves. That's the power of Michael Jackson. That's the legacy he left behind. Not just the music, not just the dancing, but the love, the genuine, unfiltered, unconditional love that he had for his fans. The world lost Michael Jackson on June 25, 2009, and when he died, a piece of that magic died with him. But stories like this one keep that magic alive. They remind us who he really was. They cut through the noise and the rumors and the tabloid garbage and show us the truth. Michael Jackson was not perfect. Nobody is. He made mistakes. He had flaws. He struggled with demons that most of us can't imagine. But underneath all of that, at his core, he was a good man, a kind man, a man who just wanted to heal the world one person at a time. And on that night in 1992, he did exactly that. Now I want to share with you some of the accounts from people who were actually there. These are testimonies that have been collected over the years from fans who attended that show. Their words are more powerful than anything I could write. One man who was in his 20s at the time said this. He said that when Michael sat down on the edge of the stage, he felt like his heart was going to explode. He said he had idolized Michael his entire life, had posters on his wall, had practiced the moonwalk in his bedroom for years. But in that moment, Michael wasn't a poster. Michael wasn't a superstar. Michael was just a guy who was hurting just like everyone else. And somehow, that made him love Michael even more. A woman who was there with her mother said that when Michael started talking to people in the front rows, her mother collapsed, just collapsed onto the floor of the arena, not from any medical issue, just from the sheer emotion of what was happening. She said her mother kept saying over and over again that this was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, and her mother had lived through wars, through hardships, through tragedies. But this moment of kindness, this moment of connection, was what moved her to tears. Another man, who was just a teenager at the time, said that Michael looked directly at him during that night. Their eyes met for just a second, but in that second he felt seen, he felt acknowledged. He felt like Michael was saying, "I know you're here, I appreciate you, you matter." He said that 1 second of eye contact changed his entire life. It gave him confidence he never had before. It made him believe in himself. And to this day, whenever he doubts himself, he thinks about that moment. And he finds the strength to keep going. These stories go on, hundreds of them, thousands of them, all from that one night, all from those 4 hours when Michael Jackson refused to leave. And here's the thing that really gets me. Here's the detail that puts everything into perspective. Michael didn't have to do any of this. He could have left. He could have hidden in his dressing room. He could have let his team handle everything. Nobody would have blamed him. The legal issues weren't his fault. The cancelled concert wasn't his doing. He was a victim of circumstances beyond his control. But Michael didn't see himself as a victim. He saw himself as someone with the power to help, the power to heal, the power to turn a disaster into a miracle. And that's exactly what he did. The police who had come to shut down the concert, they left that night as Michael Jackson fans. Several of them later gave interviews saying that what they witnessed completely changed their perception of celebrities. They expected arrogance. They expected entitlement. They expected someone who would fight and argue and make things difficult. Instead, they got a man who asked if he could apologize to his fans in person. A man who sat on the edge of a stage and talked to strangers for 4 hours. A man who cried openly because he couldn't give people what they had paid for. One of the officers said that he went home that night and hugged his kids. He said that watching Michael interact with that little girl made him realize how precious those connections are, how important it is to be present, to be kind, to be human. That's the Michael Jackson effect. He didn't just entertain people, he transformed them. He made them want to be better. He made them believe that kindness was strength and love was power. And that night, in that arena, 10,000 people experienced that transformation firsthand. I've often wondered what it would have been like to be there, to be in that crowd, to witness that moment with my own eyes. I think about the anticipation they must have felt, the excitement of finally seeing Michael Jackson live, the energy of the crowd, the electricity in the air. And then the confusion when Michael came out alone, the fear when he started apologizing, the heartbreak when he said the concert was cancelled. And then the gradual shift, the realization that something else was happening, something unexpected, something beautiful. I think about what it must have felt like to watch Michael Jackson, the biggest star in the world, sit down on the edge of a stage and become vulnerable, to become real, to become one of them. I think about the tears that must have flowed, the embraces that must have been shared, the connections that must have been formed. And I realize that those 10,000 people experienced something that most of us will never experience. A moment of pure, unfiltered humanity. A moment when fame and fortune meant nothing. A moment when all that mattered was love. Michael Jackson gave them that gift, and it didn't cost a dime. Some people say that Michael Jackson's greatest legacy is his music, and they're not wrong. The music is incredible. The songs are timeless. The albums are masterpieces. But I would argue that his greatest legacy is moments like this one, moments that nobody filmed, moments that nobody profited from, moments that existed purely because Michael Jackson cared about people. There are countless stories like this, stories of Michael visiting hospitals in the middle of the night, stories of Michael paying off mortgages for strangers, stories of Michael spending hours with dying children, stories that never made the news because Michael never wanted credit for them. He did these things because they were right, because they were kind, because they were what a decent human being does. And that's what I want people to remember, not the tabloid headlines, not the court cases, not the controversies. I want people to remember the man who sat on the edge of a stage for 4 hours because he couldn't bear to disappoint his fans. The man who came back 6 months later and did 3 free concerts to make things right. The man who hugged a crying little girl and told her that her art mattered. That's Michael Jackson. That's the king of pop. That's the man I want the world to know. Now there's one more part of this story that I haven't told you yet. One more detail that makes this whole thing even more remarkable. Remember the little girl with the drawing, the one who was lifted onto the stage, the one who Michael hugged and cried with. She grew up, she became an artist, a successful artist. Her work has been displayed in galleries around the world. She's won awards, she's earned recognition, she's built a career doing what she loves. And in every interview she gives, she credits Michael Jackson. She talks about that night. She talks about how a stranger saw her, believed in her, and told her that she had a gift. She talks about how that moment of kindness changed the trajectory of her entire life. She has a tattoo on her wrist, a small tattoo that she got on her 18th birthday. It's Michael Jackson's signature, the same signature he wrote on her drawing that night. She says that whenever she doubts herself, whenever she feels like giving up, she looks at that tattoo, and she remembers. She remembers that the king of pop himself believed in her, and if he believed in her, then maybe she should believe in herself too. That's the ripple effect of kindness. That's what happens when you take the time to see people, to acknowledge them, to encourage them. Michael Jackson probably didn't know that he was shaping the future of a young artist that night. He was just being kind. He was just doing what came naturally to him. But that kindness echoed through the years. It shaped a life. It created art. It inspired thousands of people who have seen this woman's work and been moved by it. And it all goes back to one night, one cancelled concert, one decision to stay instead of leave. That night became known among Michael Jackson's inner circle as the night of 10,000 tears. It was never officially documented. It was never turned into a documentary. It was never exploited for publicity or profit. It remained a private moment, shared only among those who were there and the people they told. But stories have a way of spreading, especially stories this powerful. Over the years, journalists have tried to track down witnesses from that night. They've found dozens of them, and every single account confirms what I've told you. The details match up. The emotions are consistent. The impact was real. One journalist who spent 3 years researching this story said that it was the most difficult piece he ever worked on. Not because the information was hard to find, but because every interview ended the same way, with tears, with long pauses, with people struggling to put into words what they had experienced. He said that one man, now in his 60s, broke down completely during the interview. This man had seen wars. He had buried family members. He had survived things that would break most people. But when he talked about that night with Michael Jackson, he couldn't hold it together. The journalist asked him why. Why did this particular memory affect him so deeply? The man thought about it for a long time, and then he said something that I will never forget. He said that in his entire life, he had never felt truly seen. He had always been invisible, a face in the crowd, a number in a system, nobody special, nobody important. But that night, Michael Jackson looked at him, really looked at him, and for one brief moment, he felt like he mattered. He felt like his existence had been acknowledged by the universe. He felt like he was real. And that feeling, he said, had sustained him through every difficult moment since. Every time life knocked him down, he remembered that moment. He remembered that the king of pop himself had seen him, had acknowledged him, had made him feel worthy. If that's not the power of human connection, I don't know what is. But here's what really gets me about this story. Here's the detail that keeps me up at night. Michael Jackson did this all the time. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't a special exception. This was just who he was. His former bodyguards have spoken about this. They've written books about it, they've given interviews about it, and they all say the same thing. Michael Jackson was the most genuinely kind person they had ever met. One bodyguard, who worked for Michael for over a decade, said that Michael would regularly stop his motorcade to talk to homeless people, not just give them money, talk to them, learn their names, hear their stories, treat them like human beings. He said that Michael would visit hospitals in the middle of the night, without any cameras, without any publicity, just to sit with sick children. He would stay for hours, he would hold their hands, he would sing to them softly, he would make them feel less alone. He said that Michael would pay for strangers' groceries, strangers' medical bills, strangers' education, quietly, anonymously, without ever expecting anything in return. This is who Michael Jackson was, not the tabloid monster, not the media creation, the real person behind the fame. And that night in 1992 was just one example of many, one moment in a lifetime of moments, one act of kindness in an ocean of generosity. But it stands out because of the scale, because of the public nature of it, because 10,000 people witnessed it firsthand. Most of Michael's kindness happened in private, in hospital rooms, in homeless shelters, in quiet moments that nobody filmed. But this time, 10,000 people saw it, 10,000 people experienced it, 10,000 people carried it with them for the rest of their lives. And now, through this video, millions more will know about it. That's why I'm telling this story, that's why I spent months researching it, that's why I'm sharing it with you now. Because the world needs to know who Michael Jackson really was. The world needs to see past the headlines and the controversies and the tabloid garbage. The world needs to remember the man, not the caricature. Let me tell you about some other witnesses from that night, people whose stories have never been told publicly until now. There was a young couple in the crowd. They had just gotten engaged the week before. They had bought tickets to the Michael Jackson concert as a celebration. It was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of their lives. When Michael announced that the concert was cancelled, the woman started crying, not because of the concert, but because she felt like it was an omen, a bad sign for their future. She was superstitious like that. But then she watched what Michael did. She watched him sit on the edge of the stage. She watched him talk to people. She watched him transform a disaster into something beautiful. And she realized that the sign wasn't bad at all. The sign was that even when things go wrong, you can choose how to respond. You can choose to hide, or you can choose to face the world with grace. She and her husband have been married for over 30 years now. They have children, grandchildren, a beautiful life together. And every anniversary, they tell the story of that night. The night that Michael Jackson taught them how to handle adversity. The night that set the tone for their entire marriage. Their children grew up hearing this story. Their grandchildren are growing up hearing it now. The lesson has been passed down through generations. That's legacy, that's impact, that's what one act of kindness can do. There was another man in the crowd that night. He was going through the darkest period of his life. He had lost his job. His wife had left him. He was struggling with depression. He had bought the ticket to the concert as a last attempt to feel something, anything. When Michael announced the cancellation, this man felt like the universe was confirming what he already believed, that nothing good would ever happen to him, that he was cursed, that there was no point in going on. He started to leave. He pushed through the crowd toward the exit. He was ready to give up on everything. But something made him stop. Something made him turn around. He saw Michael sitting on the edge of the stage, talking to people. He saw the tears. He saw the connection. He saw the love. And he felt something he hadn't felt in months, hope. He pushed back through the crowd. He got as close to the stage as he could. He didn't get to talk to Michael directly. There were too many people, but he was close enough to see Michael's face, close enough to feel the energy, close enough to be touched by what was happening. That night he went home and threw away the pills he had been hoarding. The pills he had been planning to use to end his life. He's still alive today, he's remarried, he has a successful career, he volunteers at a suicide prevention hotline. And he credits Michael Jackson with saving his life. He never got to thank Michael in person, he never got to tell him what that night meant, but he's told the story hundreds of times, to friends, to family, to the people he counsels on the hotline. Michael Jackson will never know about this man. He'll never know that his decision to stay, his decision to connect, his decision to be human literally saved a life that night. But that's the nature of kindness. You never know how far it will reach. You never know whose life you're changing. You never know what ripples you're creating in the universe. Michael Jackson just did what felt right, and somewhere in that crowd, a man decided to live. There are more stories like this, so many more. A teenager who was being bullied at school found courage that night. She watched Michael face an impossible situation with grace, and she decided to face her bullies the same way. She became an advocate for anti-bullying programs. She's helped thousands of kids. A father who had been distant from his children realized what mattered that night. He watched Michael connect with strangers and wondered why he couldn't connect with his own kids. He went home and apologized to them. He became the father he should have been all along. An elderly woman who had given up on humanity had her faith restored that night. She had seen too much cruelty in her life, too much selfishness, too much evil, but watching Michael, she remembered that goodness still existed. She spent her remaining years volunteering at a local charity. Story after story after story, life after life after life, all touched by one night, all changed by one man's decision. This is what the world lost when Michael Jackson died. Not just the music, not just the performances, but this capacity for connection, this ability to touch people's souls, this gift for making strangers feel like family. There will never be another Michael Jackson, not because of his talent, though his talent was unmatched, but because of his heart, his genuine, enormous, boundless heart. Now I want to talk about something that often gets overlooked in discussions about Michael Jackson. I want to talk about the physical toll of that night. Michael Jackson was not a healthy man. He suffered from numerous medical conditions. He dealt with chronic pain. He had trouble sleeping. His body was failing him in ways that the public never knew about. And on that night, he had already been preparing for a full concert. He had been through makeup and costume. He had done his warm-ups. His body was primed for a 2-hour performance, and then the rug was pulled out from under him. Most performers would have used that as an excuse to leave. My body was ready for a show, not for 4 hours of standing and talking and emotional labor. It would have been a valid excuse. Nobody would have questioned it. But Michael didn't make excuses. He pushed through. He ignored his physical limitations. He gave everything he had, and then he gave more. His team later revealed that Michael could barely walk the next day. His legs were shaking. His voice was hoarse. His entire body was in revolt against what he had put it through. But he didn't complain, not once. When his team expressed concern, he just smiled and said it was worth it. Every ache, every pain, every moment of exhaustion worth it. Because he had been there for his fans. He had shown up when they needed him. He had turned a disaster into a memory they would cherish forever. That's sacrifice, that's dedication, that's love in its purest form. And here's the thing that breaks my heart. Michael Jackson gave and gave and gave throughout his entire life. He gave his childhood to the music industry. He gave his privacy to the public. He gave his health to his performances. He gave his money to charities. He gave his heart to strangers. And what did the world give him in return? Mockery, suspicion, betrayal, loneliness. The same tabloids that destroyed his reputation never reported on nights like this one. They never told stories about his kindness. They never showed the world who he really was. They focused on his appearance, his eccentricities, his vulnerabilities. They turned him into a punchline, a freak show, a cautionary tale. And Michael felt every bit of it, every cruel headline, every vicious joke, every betrayal by people he trusted. But he never stopped being kind. He never stopped giving. He never let the cruelty of the world turn his heart cold. That's strength, real strength, the kind of strength that most people can't even comprehend. It's easy to be kind when the world is kind to you. It's easy to give when you're receiving in return. But to keep giving when you're constantly being taken from, to keep loving when you're constantly being hurt, that requires something superhuman. And Michael Jackson was superhuman, not because of his moonwalk, not because of his vocal range, but because of his capacity to love in the face of hatred. The night of the cancelled concert was a microcosm of his entire life. The world let him down, the system failed him, everything went wrong. And his response was to give even more, to love even harder, to be even more present. That's Michael Jackson. That's who he was until the day he died. I want to talk about the aftermath of that night from Michael's perspective. Because while the fans went home with beautiful memories, Michael went back to his hotel room alone. His team has revealed that Michael was deeply affected by what happened, not in a negative way, in a profound, spiritual way. He told his manager that the night felt like a religious experience. He said he felt closer to God during those 4 hours than he had ever felt during a performance. He said that connecting with people, really connecting, without the barrier of a stage show, was something he hadn't experienced in years. He talked about the little girl with the drawing for weeks afterward. He kept her drawing in his room. He looked at it every day. He said her face reminded him why he did what he did, why he endured the pain, why he kept going. Michael Jackson, for all his fame, was a lonely man. He was surrounded by people, but few of them truly knew him. Few of them saw past the celebrity to the person underneath. But that night, for a few hours, the barriers came down. The walls he had built to protect himself were lowered. He was just Michael, and the fans were just people, and they met each other in that space between fame and anonymity. It was healing for Michael, just as it was healing for the fans. In a way, the cancelled concert was a gift, a strange, unexpected gift. It forced everyone to slow down, to connect, to be present. If the concert had happened as planned, it would have been amazing. Michael's concerts were always amazing, but it would have been a one-way experience, Michael performing, the fans watching. Instead, what happened was a dialogue, a conversation, a mutual exchange of love and pain and hope. And I think, in his final years, Michael looked back on that night as one of the highlights of his career, not because of any performance, but because of the humanity. In the years since Michael's death, fans have organized annual memorials on June 25th. They gather in cities around the world. They play his music. They share stories. They celebrate his life and mourn his loss. And at many of these memorials, people who were at that cancelled concert share their experiences. They tell the story to newer fans who never got to see Michael live. They pass down the legend to the next generation. The story has grown over the years. It's become almost mythical. Some details have probably been embellished. That's the nature of oral tradition. But the core of the story remains true. Michael Jackson turned a disaster into a miracle. He stayed when he could have left. He gave when he had nothing left to give. And he made 10,000 people cry. If you've made it this far in the video, I want to thank you. I know this has been a long journey. I know I've asked a lot of your time and attention. But I hope you understand why this story matters. I hope you see why it needed to be told in full. Michael Jackson's reputation has been damaged by years of negative press. Generations of young people know him only through headlines and controversies. They don't know the real man. They don't know stories like this one. And that's a tragedy, because Michael Jackson's life was a testament to the power of kindness. His legacy should be one of love and generosity and human connection. Not scandal, not suspicion, not mockery. Love. So share this video. Talk about it with your friends. Bring up Michael Jackson's name in conversations, and when people smirk or make jokes, tell them this story. Tell them about the night the police stopped the show. Tell them about Michael sitting on the edge of the stage. Tell them about the little girl with the drawing. Tell them about the 4 hours of pure human connection. Tell them who Michael Jackson really was. Because the truth deserves to be told, and Michael Jackson deserves to be remembered correctly. He was the king of pop, but more importantly, he was a king of hearts, a ruler not through power, but through love. And on that night in 1992, 10,000 people experienced his reign firsthand. They cried, they laughed, they healed, they hoped. And they never forgot. Neither should we. Rest in power, Michael. Your legacy lives on, your love still echoes, your kindness still ripples through time. 10,000 tears, one unforgettable night, one incredible human being. That's the story, that's the truth, that's Michael Jackson. And now you know. Before you go, I want to hear from you. I want to know where in the world you're watching this from right now. Drop your country in the comments below. Let me see how far Michael Jackson's legacy has reached. Whether you're watching from the United States, Brazil, Japan, Germany, India, the Philippines, South Africa, or anywhere else on this planet, let me know. Because Michael Jackson's music had no borders, his love had no boundaries, and I have a feeling that people from every corner of the world are watching this video right now. So comment your country, comment your city if you want, and while you're there, tell me what Michael Jackson means to you. What's your favorite song? What's your favorite memory? Let's turn this comment section into a global tribute to the King of Pop. And if this video touched your heart, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with someone who needs to hear this story. Thank you for watching, thank you for remembering, thank you for keeping Michael's legacy alive.